My sister Caroline posted photos of my house, claiming she'd finally bought it. I commented, "Congrats," knowing I still held the deed. When the bank rejected her secret refinance attempt, she called in a panic. I whispered, "You should have asked," and initiated the eviction that ruined her. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The notification came through at 11:43 p.m., breaking the silence of my workshop like a gunshot. I was physically wrecked. My hands were stained with dark walnut varnish, my back was screaming in protest, and there was a fine layer of sawdust coating my eyelashes. I had spent the last 14 hours meticulously restoring a Victorian staircase in a client's home, a job that required the kind of patience and precision that usually left me feeling meditative. But tonight, I just felt drained. I was 36 years old, and while I had built a successful career restoring historic properties, the physical toll was becoming undeniable. I wiped my hands on a rag, smelling the sharp tang of mineral spirits, and picked up my phone. I assumed it was a late-night email from a contractor or maybe a frantic text from my mother about Sunday dinner. It was Instagram. Caroline Liveslux just made a new post. My younger sister, Caroline, or, as she preferred to be known online, a lifestyle curator. I usually scrolled past her curated brunches and heavily filtered vacation photos with a mixture of amusement and vague annoyance, but the thumbnail caught my eye. It was a house. I tapped the screen and the image expanded. My breath actually hitched in my throat. The rag dropped from my hand, landing on the drop cloth with a soft thud. It was a photo of a beautiful two-story craftsman bungalow with a wraparound porch. The sunlight was hitting the fresh sage-green paint perfectly. There was a wreath on the door. Caroline was standing on the front lawn, holding a bottle of champagne in one hand and a set of keys in the other. Her husband, Greg, was standing behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, looking smugly at the camera. The caption read, "We did it. House sparkles after years of hard work and manifesting. Greg and I officially bought our dream home today. So proud to be homeowners at 32. Hard work pays off. New home homeowners blessed grind set." The comments were already flooding in. "OMG, congrats, babe. So happy for you guys. You deserve this." I stood there in my dusty workshop, staring at the screen until the pixels seemed to blur. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a cold, heavy rhythm that made me feel sick. That wasn't just any house. That was my house. It was the property I had bought as a foreclosure 4 years ago. The property I had spent 18 months gutting, rewiring, and restoring with my own 2 hands. The property I had allowed Caroline and Greg to move into 2 years ago because they were struggling and needed a leg up. "Bought it," I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded jagged, foreign. I scrolled down to the comments again. Greg had replied to someone asking about the price. "Market was tough, but we made the right moves. Secured the asset." Secured the asset. The audacity was so sharp it almost felt like a physical slap. They hadn't bought anything. They hadn't even paid the full rent in 6 months. The deed was sitting in a fireproof safe not 10 feet away from me, with my name, Amelia, printed clearly on the top line. I felt a wave of dizziness that had nothing to do with the varnish fumes. This wasn't just a lie for social media clout. Caroline and Greg were pathologically obsessed with image, yes, but they weren't stupid enough to claim legal ownership publicly unless they thought they could get away with it. Or unless they believed their own delusions so deeply that reality had ceased to matter. I sank onto my work stool, my knees suddenly unable to support my weight. I looked at Caroline's smiling face on the screen, the sister I had tutored in math, the sister I had bilaid out of credit card debt twice, the sister I had practically raised after Dad died. She looked so happy, so triumphant, and she was stealing from me in plain sight. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me, replacing the shock. It was the same feeling I got when I found dry rot under a pristine floorboard, a realization that the structure was compromised and the only solution was to tear it out. The betrayal cut deeper than any diagnosis, deeper than any breakup I'd ever endured. They weren't just living in my house, they were assing me from it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, a mug of cold coffee untouched in front of me, staring at the physical file labeled 422 Oak Street. My workshop was attached to my primary residence, a smaller, modest cottage I lived in while I rented out the craftsman. The proximity meant I could have driven over there in 10 minutes and banged on the door. I could have screamed at them, demanded they take the post down, demanded to know why they were lying to the world. But I knew Caroline. If I confronted her now, she would cry. She would gaslight me. She would say, "Amelia, you're so dramatic, it's just for the gram, it helps Greg's business image. Why don't you want us to succeed?" And then she would call Mom. And Mom would call me, using that weary, guilt-inducing voice. "Amelia, please just let her have her moment. You know how hard things have been for Greg. Be the bigger sister." I was done being the bigger sister. I opened the file. Inside was the lease agreement we had signed 2 years ago. It was a standard rent-to-own contract, drafted by my lawyer. I had been generous, stupidly generous. The terms were simple. They paid a below-market monthly rent. An additional $500 a month would go into an escrow account to build their down payment. After 24 months, if they had never missed a payment and the escrow was full, I would sell them the house at the value it was appraised at 2 years ago, essentially gifting them about $80,000 in equity I had created through my renovations. It was the kind of deal nobody gets. It was a golden ticket. I ran my finger down the ledger I kept clipped to the front of the file. January, paid. February, paid. March, late. April, short $200. May, Greg's between checks, sis, sorry. Paid 3 weeks late. And then, 6 months ago, the payments had stopped entirely. Greg had spun me a story about a liquidity crunch involving his latest venture, some kind of dropshipping business selling high-vibration water bottles. He had promised me a lump sum payment imminently. I had let it slide because Mom had begged me to, and because I was busy with my own clients. I had sent invoices, sure. I had sent gentle reminders. But I hadn't filed for eviction because I didn't want to make Thanksgiving awkward. I looked back at my phone. The post had 400 likes now. I tapped the comment icon. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could end this right now. I could comment, "Actually, you haven't paid rent in 6 months and I still own the house." It would be nuclear. It would destroy her. Instead, I typed, "Congrats, looks beautiful." I hit send. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. It was a trap. I needed to see what they would do. If they just said, "Thanks, sis," maybe it was just a lie for the internet. Maybe they were just delusional. 2 minutes later, a notification popped up. "Caroline Liveslux liked your comment." Caroline Liveslux replied, "Thanks, Amelia. We couldn't have done it without your support." Read. Support, that was one word for it. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Greg. "Greg, hey Amelia, saw you commented. Thanks for being cool. We're actually gonna swing by the bank tomorrow to finalize some paperwork on the refi to pay you that lump sum we talked about. Exciting stuff." Refinance. I froze. You cannot refinance a home you do not own. To refinance, you need to be on the title. You need the deed. For a second, panic flared. Had I signed something? Had I accidentally given them power of attorney in some stack of paperwork? I rifled through the file again, my hands trembling slightly. No, the quitclaim deed, the document that transfers ownership from one person to another, was right here. Unsigned. Notarized by me, but never executed, never recorded with the county because they hadn't met the terms of the contract. So how was Greg planning to swing by the bank to refinance? Unless, I remembered a conversation from 3 months ago. Greg had asked to borrow the original deed for the insurance company, claiming they needed to verify the property lines for a policy update. I had refused, sending a photocopy instead. But Greg was slippery. He knew people. He was always bragging about his network. If he was walking into a bank to refinance, he either had a forged deed, or he was operating under a level of stupidity that was frankly dangerous. I looked at the text again, finalized some paperwork. A cold smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a craftsman who realizes the termites have revealed themselves, and now the extermination can begin. Greg thought he was playing 4D chess. He thought I was just the dusty, single older sister who restored old wood and didn't understand high finance. He thought because I didn't post my wins on Instagram, I didn't have any power. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. To get a loan, eBank doesn't just look at your Instagram. They look at the county clerk's records. And in the eyes of the law, Caroline and Greg were nothing more than tenants who were 6 months behind on rent. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand Caroline. Or, more specifically, the version of Caroline I had spent my life protecting. Our father died when I was 22 and Caroline was 18. Our mother fell apart, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, fading way. She retreated into her garden and her grief, leaving me to navigate the estate, the bills, and Caroline's college applications. I didn't mind. I loved them. I took the role of the patriarch. I worked 2 jobs while finishing my architecture degree so Caroline wouldn't have to take out loans. I was the one who drove her to move-in day. I was the one who fixed her first flat tire. I was the one who consoled her through every bad breakup. I had built my life around the concept of restoration. I took broken things, houses, furniture, people, and I poured time and love into them until they were whole again. I thought Caroline was just another restoration project. I thought if I just gave her enough support, enough money, enough chances, she would eventually stand on her own foundation. Then she met Greg. Greg was 34, possessed a smile that showed too many teeth, and listed his occupation on Facebook as visionary. He didn't have a job, he had ventures. There was the crypto mining rig that caught fire in their apartment. There was the organic dog food subscription service that failed because he forgot to get a license to distribute food. And now, there was the lifestyle brand. Greg was the one who convinced Caroline that she was too special for a 9-to-5 job. He was the one who isolated her from her old friends, claiming they had poverty mindsets. And he was the one who had looked at my restored craftsman bungalow not as a home, but as a backdrop for content. I remember the day they moved in. I was there, helping them unpack. "This light is terrible," Greg had said, standing in the kitchen I had spent 3 weeks tiling by hand. "We're going to need to rip out these fixtures, install some track lighting." "These are original 1920s brass fixtures, Greg," I had said, trying to keep my voice even. "They're worth more than your car." He had laughed, a dismissive, airy sound. "Amelia, you're so stuck in the past. We need to modernize, increase the equity." Equity, he used that word like a talisman. He didn't understand that equity is earned, not claimed. Now, sitting in my kitchen the morning after the Instagram post, the image of Greg became the focal point of my rage. Caroline was weak, yes. She was entitled. But Greg was the architect of this disaster. He was the one pushing for the refi. He was the one who needed cash to fund his next failure. I decided to do some digging before I responded to his text. I called a friend of mine, Sarah, who worked in real estate law. "Amelia," she answered on the first ring. "I saw Caroline's post. I thought you said you were holding the deed until they finished the 2-year term." "I am," I said, my voice tight. "That's the problem. Greg texted me saying they are going to the bank to refinance today." Sarah was silent for a moment. "That's fraud, attempted mortgage fraud. If they try to sign papers claiming ownership, they're committing a felony." I know, I said, but do they know? Amelia, Sarah warned, if they are this desperate, they might try to forge your signature on a quitclaim. Have you checked the county records online this morning? My stomach dropped. No. Do it, now. If there's a pending recording, we need to stop it. I hung up and scrambled to my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I navigated to the county clerk's portal. I searched the property address, 422 Oak Street. Last recorded document, warranty deed. Grantee, Amelia Vance. Date, 4 years ago. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. They hadn't forged anything yet. The deed was safe. Which meant Greg was walking into a bank today to try and take out a loan against a house he didn't own, probably hoping he could fast-talk the loan officer, or maybe hoping that I would just sign whatever papers he shoved in front of me if he made it sound like standard procedure. He viewed me as a resource, an NPC in the video game of his life. He thought he could just press X to interact and I would dispense money. I looked at his text again. Greg, hey Amelia, saw you commented. Thanks for being cool. We're actually gonna swing by the bank tomorrow to finalize some paperwork on the refi to pay you that lump sum we talked about. Exciting stuff. He wasn't asking me to come to the bank. He was saying they were going. He truly believed he could refinance my house without me even being there. The sheer incompetence was staggering, but the intent was malicious. He was trying to steal the equity I had built. He wanted to strip the value out of the house, probably spend it on branding consultants, and leave me with the debt when he inevitably defaulted. I picked up my phone. I wasn't going to warn them. I wasn't going to stop them. If Greg wanted to play big shot businessman, I was going to let him have his meeting. I replied, "That sounds great, Greg. Which bank are you using? I want to make sure I have my records straight for tax season." He replied instantly, "First National Downtown. Meeting with a guy named Mr. Henderson at 2 p.m. Don't worry, we'll handle everything." Don't worry, we'll handle everything. Okay, I said to the empty room. Handle it. I stood up. The exhaustion from the night before was gone, replaced by a cold, vibrating energy. I went to my closet and pushed aside my work clothes, the flannel shirts, the cargo pants stiff with paint. I reached for the back, pulling out the navy blue blazer and tailored slacks I wore for high-end client meetings. I wasn't going to the workshop today. I was going to the bank. But I wasn't going to the meeting. I was going to sit in the lobby. I wanted to see the look on Greg's face when the reality of the real world collided with his manifested fantasy. I arrived at First National Bank at 1:45 p.m. The lobby was cool and smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. I took a seat in a high-backed armchair in the far corner, partially obscured by a large artificial ficus tree. From here, I had a clear view of the glass-walled offices where the loan officers conducted their business. I had brought a book, but I didn't open it. I just watched the door. At 1:58 p.m., they walked in. Caroline looked stunning. I had to give her that. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car, her hair blown out in soft, expensive waves. She was holding a designer handbag that looked suspiciously new. She looked the part of the successful homeowner. Greg was strutting. He wore a slim-fit blue suit with no tie and loafers with no socks. He was talking loudly on his phone, likely to nobody, saying things like, "Yeah, just moved the capital to the holding co. I'm walking into a closing now." He hung up as they approached the reception desk. I saw the receptionist smile, check a list, and point toward the corner office, Mr. Henderson's office. As they walked past my hiding spot, I heard Greg whisper to Caroline, "Just let me do the talking. Henderson is old school. He needs to see the alpha energy." I almost laughed out loud. Alpha energy. They entered the office. Mr. Henderson, a gray-haired man with the weary expression of someone who has seen every financial scam under the sun, stood up to shake their hands. The door closed, muffling their voices, but the glass walls turned the meeting into a silent film. I saw Greg gesturing expansively. I saw him slide a thick folder across the desk, likely full of projections and brand valuations. I saw Caroline nodding enthusiastically, flashing her winning smile. Then, I saw Mr. Henderson open a file on his computer. The mood in the glass box shifted instantly. Mr. Henderson frowned. He tapped a few keys, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the screen again. He said something. Greg stopped gesturing. Caroline's smile faltered. Greg leaned forward, pointing at the folder he had brought. He looked agitated. Mr. Henderson shook his head slowly, picked up a piece of paper from his own desk, and held it up. It was a short meeting. 10 minutes later, the door opened. They didn't stride out, they practically stumbled. Greg's face was a mask of red, blotchy rage. Caroline looked confused and terrified, clutching her handbag like a shield. "This is ridiculous," Greg was saying, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear. "Your system is outdated. I have the equity. It's implied ownership." "Sir," Mr. Henderson said, stepping into the doorway. His voice was calm but icy. "You cannot borrow against a property you do not own. The title is in the name of Amelia Vance. Unless you have Ms. Vance here to sign as a co-borrower, this application is fraudulent. Have a nice day." He closed the door. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Every customer, every teller was looking at them. Caroline turned to Greg, her voice trembling. "Greg, you said you handled the deed transfer. You said Amelia signed it last week." I froze. He told her I signed it. "She did," Greg lied, his voice cracking. "She must have. She must have messed up the filing. She's disorganized, you know how she is. She probably left it on her workbench." I stood up. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the quiet room, "I keep my paperwork very organized." Caroline whipped around. When she saw me, the color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Greg looked like a deer caught in headlights, if the deer was also a narcissist wearing fake Gucci loafers. "Amelie." Caroline whispered. I walked toward them, my heels clicking on the tile floor. "Hi, Caroline. Hi, Greg." "You," Greg stammered, trying to regain his composure. "Amelia, great, you're here, perfect timing. There's been a mix-up with the bank system. They think you still own the house." "I do still own the house, Greg," I said, stopping 3 feet away from them. "Because you haven't paid rent in 6 months, and you certainly haven't paid the down payment required to trigger the transfer." Caroline looked at Greg, then back at me. "Wait, 6 months. Greg said he paid the lump sum in March. He showed me the receipt." "He showed you a fake receipt, Caroline," I said gently. "Just like he showed you a fake reality where you own a home you can't afford." Greg's eyes darted around the lobby. He realized the audience wasn't on his side. He switched tactics instantly. He puffed out his chest, trying to loom over me. "Look, Amelia," he sneered, dropping the friendly act. "We don't need to do this here. You're embarrassing your sister. Just sign the cosigner papers so we can get the cash, and we'll pay you everything we owe you out of the loan. It's simple business." "No," I said. "What do you mean no?" Greg demanded. "We have a deal, rent to own." "The deal is void," I said. Clause 4, Section B, failure to pay rent for more than 60 days results in immediate termination of the option to purchase. You're not buyers anymore, Greg, you're tenants, and you're in default. I reached into my bag and pulled out a white envelope. I had prepared it that morning, just in case. "This is a 3-day notice to pay or quit," I said, handing it to Caroline. She took it automatically, her hands shaking. "You have 3 days to pay the $14,400 in back rent you owe me. If you don't, I'm filing for eviction." "You can't do that," Greg shouted. "We just posted about the house. Our followers think we bought it. You'll ruin our brand." "Your brand is built on a lie," I said. "I suggest you start packing." I turned and walked out of the bank. I didn't look back, but I heard Caroline burst into tears. The fallout was immediate. By the time I got back to my workshop, my phone was blowing up. Not from Greg, I had blocked him, but from our family. my Aunt Linda called. Amelia, Caroline is hysterical. She says you humiliated them at the bank. She says you promised them the house and now you're stealing it back because you're jealous of her success. Jealous of what success, Aunt Linda? I asked, putting my phone on speaker so I could start sanding a banister. The success of being $14,000 in debt to her sister. Well, Linda hesitated. She said Greg has a big deal coming through. Greg always has a big deal coming through, I cut in. Listen, I love you, but I'm not the bad guy here. They tried to commit mortgage fraud. I stopped them. I hung up, then Mom called. This was the call I was dreading. Amelia, her voice was small, wavering. Please, just give them a little more time. Greg said if you just sign the paper, they can pay you back everything next week. He swore on his father's grave. Mom, I said, feeling that old, familiar weight pressing on my chest. He is lying to you. He lied to Caroline. He told her he paid me. He didn't. If I sign those papers, the bank will give him the money, my equity, and he will lose it all. And then the bank will take the house. Do you want the bank to foreclose on the house Dad and I restored? Silence, that hit home. Mom loved that house. It was one of the last projects Dad worked on before he got sick. I didn't know that, she whispered. Caroline told me you were just being difficult about paperwork. Caroline doesn't know what's going on because she lets Greg handle the finances, I said. I gave them a notice. They have 3 days. 3 days is so fast, Mom cried. Where will they go? They can go to Greg's parents, I said, or they can use some of that money they allegedly have. I hung up feeling like a monster, but a monster with boundaries. That night, things got ugly online. I checked Caroline's Instagram. She hadn't taken down the house post. Instead, she had posted a story. A black screen with white text. So sad when family turns on you out of jealousy. Some people can't handle seeing others shine. The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. We are facing a major legal battle against a toxic relative who is trying to steal our home illegally. Please send prayers, and if anyone knows a good real estate shark lawyer, DM us. I stared at the screen. Toxic relative, steal our home. The rage I felt earlier had cooled into something harder, something permanent. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't comment on her post. I didn't engage in a public spat. I drafted an email to my lawyer. Subject, eviction proceedings, 422 Oak Street attachment. Copy of lease, ledger of missed payments. Copy of 3-day notice. Body, proceed immediately. No settlements, I want them out. Then, I did something I had never done before. I opened my own Facebook page. I rarely posted, mostly just photos of my restoration projects for friends and family. I wrote a status. For those asking, I am the sole owner of the property at 422 Oak Street. It has not been sold. Any claims otherwise are false. I am currently dealing with a non-paying tenant situation. I ask for privacy during this time. I set the privacy to public. Within an hour, the phone calls stopped. The family gossip mill had received new data. The narrative was shifting. But Greg wasn't done. At 10:00 p.m., a car screeched into my driveway. I looked out the window. It was Greg's leased BMW. He banged on my front door. Amelia, open up, we need to talk. I didn't open the door. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. He looked disheveled. He was pacing back and forth on my porch, looking manic. You ruined everything, he shouted at the door. The investors saw your post. They pulled out. You cost me $1 million deal. Go home, Greg, I said through the doorbell intercom, or I'm calling the police. You think you're so smart, he spat at the camera. But you don't know who you're messing with. I have rights. Squatters' rights. I'll gut that house before I leave. I'll strip the copper. I'll smash every window. I hit the record button on the app. Say that again, Greg, I asked calmly. I missed the first part. I said I'll burn it down before I let you have it. He screamed. Thank you, I said. I have that recorded. Now get off my property. The police are already on their way. He froze. He looked at the camera, realizing what he had done. He turned and ran to his car, peeling out of the driveway just as I saw the blue lights of a patrol car turning onto my street. I hadn't called them yet, but my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, apparently had. Bless Mrs. Higgins. The next morning, I filed for a restraining order alongside the eviction. The video of Greg threatening to burn down the house made it a slam dunk. The judge granted a temporary order immediately, which meant Greg couldn't come within 500 feet of me or the property at 422 Oak Street. This complicated their lives significantly, as he was currently living there. The sheriff's deputies served him the order at 2:00 p.m. I wasn't there, but Mrs. Higgins gave me the play-by-play. He was screaming like a banshee, she told me over the fence as I watered my hydrangeas. Threw his clothes into the car. Caroline was just standing on the porch crying. With Greg removed from the house, I hoped Caroline would come to her senses. I hoped she would call me, apologize, and ask for help leaving him. She didn't. Instead, she doubled down. She stayed in the house. 2 days later, the 3-day notice expired. I filed the unlawful detainer lawsuit. That afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Amelia Vance?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded tired. "Yes." "My name is Jessica. I saw your Facebook post. A friend shared it." She paused. "I used to date Greg about 5 years ago." My grip tightened on the phone. "Okay." "I just wanted to warn you," she said. "He did this to me too, not a house, but he convinced me to take out a business loan in my name for a startup. He spent it all on clothes and trips, then ghosted me when the payments started. I had to declare bankruptcy." "I'm so sorry," I said, feeling a chill run down my spine. "He's a predator, Amelia," Jessica said. "He looks for women who have something to lose, reputation, family, credit, and he leverages it. He told me once that shame is the best collateral. He knows you won't want to embarrass your sister." "He's wrong," I said. "I'm past embarrassment." "Good," she said, "because he has a pattern. Check the public records in Nevada and Arizona. He has judgments against him under the name Gregory Sloan. He changed his last name to Stone when he moved here." "Sloan." "Thank you, Jessica," I said. "You have no idea how much this helps." I spent the next 4 hours online. Jessica was right. Gregory Sloan had a trail of destruction across the Southwest. Small claims court judgments, 2 evictions, and a fraud charge that had been dismissed due to lack of evidence. I printed everything. Then I drove to 422 Oak Street. I couldn't go in. I had to respect the tenant laws until the eviction was final. But I could tape a large envelope to the front door. Inside the envelope were the court records from Nevada and Arizona. The bankruptcy filings of his ex-girlfriends, the truth about Gregory Stone. On the front of the envelope I wrote, "Caroline, read this, please." I taped it to the door, right over the wreath she had posted on Instagram. I walked back to my truck and waited. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Caroline stepped out looking haggard. She was wearing sweatpants, no makeup. She saw the envelope. She took it down. She opened it standing right there on the porch. I watched through my windshield as she read. I saw her shoulders slump. I saw her hand go to her mouth. She flipped through page after page, the mugshot from Arizona, the judgment for $50,000 from a woman in Las Vegas. She stood there for a long time. Then she looked out at the street. She didn't know I was watching from down the block. She turned around and went back inside, taking the envelope with her. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "Caroline, can you come over? He's not here." I drove the truck up the driveway. When I walked inside, the house smelled stale. There were boxes everywhere. The staging furniture they had used for photos was pushed against the walls. Caroline was sitting at the kitchen table, the papers spread out in front of her. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Is this real?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," I said, sitting down opposite her. He's a con artist, Carrie. He's been doing this for years. He told me he was a venture capitalist, she sobbed. He told me the money was tied up in offshore accounts. He told me you were just jealous because you're single and bitter. I know, I said softly. I gave him my savings, she confessed, the tears spilling over. The money Dad left me, the $20,000. He said he invested it in the water bottle company. It's gone, isn't it? Probably, I said. She put her head in her hands. I posted about this house. Everyone thinks I'm successful. Everyone thinks we're rich. If I leave him, I'll look like a fool. I'll have nothing. You already have nothing, Caroline, I said firmly. The only difference is whether you keep the lie or keep your dignity. She looked up at me, fear warring with pride. But the eviction, you filed it. I can drop it, I said. If you leave him, if you vacate the house voluntarily and let me change the locks, you can come stay with me, we can fix this, but Greg has to go. She looked at the papers again. Then she looked at the empty spot on her finger where her wedding ring used to be. She had taken it off and placed it on the table. He's coming back tonight, she whispered. He's going to try to sneak in. He wants to take the appliances. He said they're worth money. I stood up, let him try. Caroline agreed to pack a bag and leave immediately. We loaded her essentials into my truck, clothes, her laptop, and a few boxes of sentimental items. She left the lifestyle props behind. I'm scared, she said as she climbed into the passenger seat. He's going to be so angry. He's going to be arrested if he shows up, I reminded her. The restraining order is active. I drove her to Mom's house. It was safer there, and Mom needed to see her, to hold her, to break the spell Greg had cast over the family. I didn't stay. I had work to do. I drove back to 422 Oak Street. I parked my truck in the driveway, facing the street. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, waiting. I had already called the sheriff's non-emergency line to let them know I was on the property securing it, and that I expected the restrained party might attempt to violate the order. They promised a patrol car would do frequent drive-bys. But I wasn't just relying on the police. I went inside and turned on the lights, every single one of them. I wanted the house to look alive. I wanted it to look inviting. Then I sat in the living room chair, facing the front door, and waited. At 11:45 p.m., a U-Haul truck rumbled down the quiet street. It slowed as it passed the house, then circled back and parked clumsily on the lawn, tearing up the grass I had reseeded in the spring. Greg jumped out. He wasn't alone. He had two guys with him, large, confused-looking men who looked like they'd been hired for beer and pizza. Greg strode up to the front door. He tried the handle. Locked. He pounded on the door. Caroline, open up. We're taking the fridge and the washer dryer. Open the damn door. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it wide. Greg froze. The two guys behind him stopped, holding a hand truck. Amelia, Greg snarled. He looked manic, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Where's Caroline? Gone, I said calmly. She left you, Greg. She knows about Arizona. She knows about Jessica. She knows everything. His face twitched. You poison her against me, you jealous witch. He tried to push past me. Get out of my way. I'm taking my property. I didn't move. You don't own any property here, Greg. The appliances came with the house. They are listed on the inventory sheet you signed 2 years ago. If you try to remove them, that's theft. And since you're violating a restraining order right now, that's just the cherry on top. I don't care about your piece of paper, he screamed, spitting as he spoke. He turned to the two guys. Grab the TV, grab the furniture, ever. Ithing goes. The two guys looked at me, then at Greg. They didn't move. Actually, I said to the men, raising my voice slightly. This man has a restraining order against him for this address. The police are on their way. If you enter this house, you are accomplices to burglary and violating a court order. I suggest you leave. The bigger guy looked at Greg. Dude, you said this was your house and your wife lost the keys. It is my house, Greg shrieked. She's lying. Just then, the blue and red lights flooded the front lawn. Greg spun around. Two sheriff's cruisers blocked the U-Haul in. "Gregory Stone," a deputy shouted over the PA. "Hands where we can see them." Greg didn't put his hands up. He panicked. He looked at the open door, then at me. For a second, I thought he might try to grab me, to use me as a shield or a hostage. I stepped back and slammed the heavy oak door in his face, locking the deadbolt. I watched through the peephole. Greg ran toward the side yard, trying to hop the fence into Mrs. Higgins' yard. He didn't make it. The deputies tackled him before he even reached the rose bushes. I heard him screaming as they cuffed him. "This is a mistake. I'm a business owner. I have rights. My lawyer will sue this entire department." The two hired guys were standing by the U-Haul with their hands up, looking thoroughly regretful of their life choices. I watched as they dragged Greg to the cruiser. He was kicking and thrashing, his alpha energy dissolving into a pitiful tantrum. I rested my forehead against the cool wood of the door. It was over. The aftermath was messy, but swift. Greg was charged with violating a restraining order, attempted burglary, and resisting arrest. While he was in custody, the fraud charges from Nevada caught up with him. He wasn't going to be manifesting anything for a long time, except perhaps a plea deal. Caroline filed for divorce 3 weeks later. It was uncontested because Greg couldn't afford a lawyer. The hardest part was the house. I walked through it the day after Greg's arrest. It was trashed. There were holes in the drywall where he had punched it in anger. The carpets were stained. The garden I had planted was dead from neglect. It hurt to see my work disrespected like that, but then I remembered, I'm a restorer. This is what I do. Caroline offered to help fix it up, but I told her no. She needed to focus on fixing herself. She got a job as a receptionist at a dental office, a humble, normal job with a steady paycheck. She moved into a small apartment near Mom. She stopped posting on Instagram. She started therapy. One afternoon, about 2 months later, I was on the front porch of 422 Oak Street, painting the railing. A car pulled up. It was Caroline. She walked up the path, holding 2 coffees. She looked different. Tired, yes, but real. The fake tan was gone. The designer clothes were replaced by jeans and a sweater. "Hey," she said, handing me a cup. "Hey," I said, taking it. She looked at the house. "It looks better already." "It's getting there," I said. "Bones are good, just needed to clear out the rot." She winced slightly at the metaphor, but she nodded. "I'm sorry, Amelia, for everything, for the post, for believing him over you, for being so stupid." "You weren't stupid," I said, putting down my paintbrush. "You were manipulated. He was a professional." "I still feel stupid," she admitted. "I told the whole world I bought this place. Now I have to tell them I didn't." "You don't have to tell them anything," I said. "Your life isn't for them, it's for you." She smiled, a small, sad smile. "You were right about the dreams come true when you ask permission thing. That was harsh." I was angry, I admitted. "Fair," she said. She looked at the front door. "I found my old sketchbook. From college, I started drawing again." "That's good," I said. "You were always talented." Maybe one day I can help you with the staging. For real this time, no track lighting." I laughed. "We'll see. Let's start with sanding these railings." She picked up a sanding block. "Deal." We worked in silence for a while, the only sound the rhythmic scratch of sandpaper on wood. It wasn't a glamorous moment. It wouldn't get 1,000 likes. But as the sun went down over the house that was finally, truly mine again, I felt a sense of peace that no amount of internet clout could buy. The house was safe. The parasite was gone, and my sister was slowly, painfully coming back to life. That was the best restoration project of all.